All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Geek Garage podcast. I'm your host, David, and joined with me, as per usual, is my co-host, Ted White. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing good. It's not been usual here lately.
Yeah, I was, as I was saying it, I was like, wait, it actually isn't per usual. This is actually the first episode of 2021 where it's just you and I. Isn't that correct?
Well, that's not entirely correct because I was on the episode with Mac, but this is number two.
Well, I mean, like just you and me with
Okay,
no
yeah,
guests.
yeah. I think that's probably true then. Yeah.
Right. Um, but yeah, it's good to be back to the old grind where it's just you and me, and we have to pretend like we know stuff
Yes.
and are in fact not idiots.
Well, pretending at least.
Right. Yeah. But anyways, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We are marching ever forward with our Informal Paranormal series. This is part 4, and today we're going to be talking about dig through the ditches and burn through the witches and nope. Oh,
Rob
wrong.
Zombie.
Yeah. Okay. So not Rob Zombie, just zombies. Okay.
Rob,
Yeah.
this song is nothing but unintelligible lyrics and spliced clips from pornos of women moaning. That's right. Drop that shit.
uh and then Rob comes back with like more edits and you're just like, Rob, this is just like clips from A Clockwork Orange. What is going on?
This sounds like you literally just got a razor blade and all the cassette tapes in your house together and did a bunch of cocaine.
Anyways, so yeah, we are in fact talking about zombies today. And it is a hefty topic, just like all the other topics that we have tackled for our Informal Paranormal series. It's a big one. It's a doozy, and there's entire podcasts out there dedicated to cryptids and zombies and aliens and all that other bullshit. So obviously, we're only going to barely crack the surface with one episode
That's
dedicated
right.
to the topic.
That is correct. If you want a deep dive, we suggest that you go listen to a better podcast.
Right. People who know what they're talking about,
Yes.
instead of two jackasses that
Jabronis. Yeah.
right, jackass jabronis. But yeah, regardless of how prepared or ill prepared or
Unprepared, really.
um just how spread out thinly the content for this episode is, we are excited to dive into this because zombies is something that Ted and I both enjoy talking about, the topic itself, and especially when it comes to horror movies with zombies. So we're definitely excited about this episode. Ted, I'm assuming you're pretty pumped as well.
Yes, I am finally. I'm excited that we're finally able to answer George Carlin's age-old question of where the fuck all the zombies are.
Is that an age-old question that he asked?
Yeah, it's one of his bits.
But yeah, Ted, if you are ready, we will go ahead and push the button for the intro music and get this shit show on the road.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, boop. All right, Ted, so do you know where the origins of zombies comes from?
Vaguely, yes. So, it's related to a lot of like Haitian folklore, Caribbean folklore, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, where a deceased person, or their body at least, is reanimated. Generally speaking, to be controlled by the person reanimating them
Mm-hmm.
through some sort of magic.
Yeah, that is the gist that I have gotten, or did get through my, you know, uh, miles and miles of research that I did. Just joking. I did the bare minimum, enough to say, hey, I know a little bit about the history of where zombies come from. But you are correct. It is largely derived from Haitian culture and their folklore. Um, and uh, I believe there are some origins in Brazil and West Africa as well, but largely, it comes from Haiti. And one interesting thing that I was kind of reading, a book that seems to be well revered by like a good cross section of people, like horror directors and writers and just all kinds of different people that are into like the macabre. It's a book written by a dude called W.B. Seabrook. It was published in 1929, called The Magic Islands, and if I'm not mistaken, it was pretty much like the first exposure in Western culture of like the voodoo zombie, which is the Haitian, derived from the Haitian folklore. I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the first sort of large imprint on Western culture. Now, obviously, um, people who had moved to the states or been moved to the states from Haiti or from similar places, they of course were aware of it. But I think you're probably right. That's most likely the first, I guess, first time white people heard about it. I would say probably by and
Yeah,
large.
right. The copy that I almost decided to buy, I think it was actually out of stock. I was looking at it on Amazon, and the most recently published version or updated version, um, it was just recently updated, I think within the last 10 years or so, but it's got clips or an afterword or a prologue from, I think it was Neil Gaiman.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, a couple different people had cited the book as like a staple in their writing or their screenwriting. Um, so I thought that was pretty interesting how it seems like a staple for a lot of people that have their hands in like zombie movies and the zombie culture.
Right. I mean, you talked about that novel or that book, The Magic Island, really kind of being a touchstone for a lot of people and something they sort of refer to as a guideline. I think that that's probably true. I think the Romero films, for a more modern audience,
Mm,
in a sense, like a younger audience,
right.
is I think the Romero films are probably kind of what they get it from, and then like an even younger generation would probably be like The Walking Dead, because that's been the big one for over the last what 10 or so years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been over 10 years, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Um,
that show is it's complicated. Um, but I mean, even with all those different sort of iterations, the rules, quote unquote, have basically stayed largely the same.
mhm,
I mean, there have
yeah,
been some deviations from your standard zombie fare, and before we go any further, especially with like talking about deviations, I think we should probably mention what like the quote unquote rules are.
sure.
Uh, so zombies are reanimated corpses. We covered that.
Mhm.
They kept that one true to the source material at least. Compelled to eat the flesh of the living. Maybe we're tasty. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. Could
Could be.
taste like chicken.
Might maybe. If everything tastes like chicken, what does chicken taste like?
Um, Tofu.
Okay, I will compare that later and report back.
IU killer tofu.
Zombies are unthinking, tireless, and I don't know that impervious to injury is the right thing because they can be hurt, but I think they're unfeeling, so that I don't think the pain affects them necessarily. So
Right, yeah. For everything that we've seen, or most everything that we've seen, the everything that you do short of impaling the brain, just slows them down. So
right.
essentially, you're just wasting your ammo if unless you're like just a shitty shot, which would be me.
Well, you're still wasting your ammo then if you're a shitty shot. But
Right. Well,
a-
sure.
as David alluded to, and of course there's the classic line: remove the head or destroy the brain. Those are kind
Hmm.
of the ground rules, so to speak, with zombies. Now, like I was saying before we got into that, there have been some diversions or deviations from that. I think one big one to point to is the 28 days, 28 weeks later series.
Yeah.
The first one, Days, is really, really good. And the second one is a movie that I watched once. Um,
I like 28 weeks later.
well, nobody's perfect, David.
I will be the first to admit that.
Yeah. So, in which case, those you had the quote unquote fast zombies, and a lot of people were
Mm.
annoyed by that. Which I get it. I'm a purist in a lot of ways too, but I think you can make a pretty cogent argument that that's not really a zombie movie. They just took a lot of inspiration from zombie tropes.
Yeah, when I was doing, some other research as far as like the most celebrated of zombie movies, and not just the classics, but throughout all time, classics and contemporary, there was I was reading about like the argument to be made that the 28 days and weeks later zombies aren't actually zombies like you were saying, and just like you said, the fact that they run, that's one of the main arguments, and two, the fact that it is what the rage virus or whatever that
Yeah.
they called it in the movie, like traditionally speaking, for the most part up until that point, zombies were reanimated by some sort of magic, or you know uh I don't know. Uh it, it it wasn't really a virus,
Right.
or it wasn't really explained at all. A lot of the times in movies it was just boom, zombies. So yeah, I totally get the argument for those movies not really being quote unquote zombie movies. I beg to differ, because I think it's fun to kind of have the term zombie be a little bit more, um I guess, spread out, for lack of better words. But yeah, anyways, we can tackle that whenever we get to the movies part of the episode.
Right. So yeah, as David said, we're going to put a pin in that and come back to that because we like to talk about movies, and you know what you get with this podcast. So
Yeah, apparently you listeners don't mind us talking about movies either, which is fantastic.
that's
Um,
literally the only thing in the world I like.
you like me, don't you?
Moving right
No,
along.
okay.
Recently, over the last 10 to 15 years, I would say, there has been a budding subculture of zombie fans that sort of seem to want a zombie apocalypse. You see a lot of these stickers, especially on like SUVs that are like, zombie apocalypse response squad or something like that.
Right.
Um, so David, let's talk about preparing for a real zombie apocalypse.
Sure. So I know that I probably wouldn't die on day one, but I don't think I would be one of the I wouldn't be like a season 10 survivor. Like I
That's fair.
wouldn't be, like I'd be gone by like halfway through season 2.
Hmm.
I think, and because of some stupid shit, like I forgot my inhaler, and so
You wouldn't
the
be you wouldn't be cannon fodder exactly, but you also probably wouldn't be a long term character.
right, but I would make sure that my death was tragic, and that
Right. Got to
yeah,
tug at them heartstrings.
right, that at least one or two tears were shed.
Right.
Um, um, yeah, I the idea of an actual zombie apocalypse isn't really something that I considered too much up until recently. Like I feel like this is a decent time to kind of talk about it because of the pandemic and everything.
Yeah. Well, with the Rona. Yeah.
Right. Um, I feel like if one were to happen, a good possibility would be like someone using it, like actually making a like an airborne virus on purpose for the use of like biological warfare, or maybe like it getting out of hand, and all of a sudden it breaks, the quarantine lab and contaminates everyone, and then it just runs amok. And I mean, we all saw how easily COVID spread across the entire fucking planet. So um, I feel like it's less of a fantasy now more than ever. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of zombies, I think that's pretty steadily and handily in the realm of fantasy. Although I will say that I am tempted to agree with your assessment of, or with your comparison rather, between COVID and a hypothetical zombie apocalypse or zombie
Hmm.
type outbreak. In that we would probably fuck it up just like we did the coronavirus. And instead of doing the bare minimum to stop the spread, just be like, the economy though, or whatever your excuse du jour is. Um,
Right.
and you would end up, getting bit while waiting for the bus or something. Because, God forbid that the goddamn box store doesn't open on time,
The
or something like
box
that.
store.
you I was going to use a specific store, then I was like, I don't want to get sued. So,
Sure. Um, y- yeah. I growing up, watching a few zombie movies and stuff, I always thought to myself, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's literally the end of the world. Why wouldn't people like band together and be like, you know what? We now finally at the this apocalypse, we finally have a common enemy. So let's all band together and be friends and let's fight this common enemy.
what did you learn, David?
I learned that that's utter total bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, just the toilet paper situation alone. Like, there's no sign of us as humans to do that. To
Yeah.
like be kind to. I mean, like, humans are capable of kindness. I don't want to sound like a complete fucking downer here.
That's right.
That's
That's my
not
job. So,
your words. But I just want to express that now I understand, how it's portrayed in shows and movies, how like there's fucking gangs that form, and like you can't trust people more than ever. Um, at the sign of an apocalypse. So
it's depressing. Um, let's take this one step further. Let's take this little hypothetical one step further.
yeah,
How
do it.
would you go about preparing to adapt and survive in this apocalypse? Would you have a bomb shelter, some sort of above ground facility? What would you do?
So are we talking like I have prep time, like, or like, say if just starting tomorrow, you're like, David, you have to prepare for a possible oncoming zombie apocalypse.
David, the fact that you just asked that tells me all I need to know. You would not be
Does it?
prepared and you would die immediately.
You're correct. No. Um,
Well,
so
let's just assume that you have survived by hook or by crook. Um,
okay.
and now that things have established themselves as the new normal, as it were,
Hmm.
you have some time to prepare on the fly, so to speak.
Sure. Well, I actually did give this quite a bit of thought over the last couple of days. And I think one of the biggest things would be to play to one's strengths. So, figure out what you do well. I was thinking about the game Dead Island, and you have all different kinds of characters to choose from. And they all have like their own special abilities. There's like a big beefy guy, and then there's like the kickboxer guy, and they all have their own special things. So I feel like that would be an important thing to take into consideration is playing to your strengths. And while I'm not like an endurance runner, I can be pretty fast for short bursts. So I feel like as long as I got a decent pair of running shoes, I could run away from zombies, provided that they are the slow ones. And I feel like a melee weapon would probably be best suited for me because I can be pretty agile if I need to be. So something like a katana or um, a sword or a machete, something like that. Um, I also don't get grossed out easily. Like I actually laugh when people vomit. I don't know what
That's because it's
what it
funny. I don't know. I mean,
yeah. Some people get grossed out, blood, guts, gore, etc. People get grossed out by that shit. Like I feel like I could handle that well. So, in close quarters, quote unquote, combat with a zombie, I feel like I might even take a little bit of pleasure of slicing through some fuckers' brains.
okay, well, we're gonna get you some serious, serious psychological evaluation after this episode's over.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com. Man, if they were actually a sponsor, that would be one fucking hell of a segue.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I am not agile. I am fat, and I have a bad knee and a bad back. So, I'm going to go ahead and rely on the fact that I have 4 loaded weapons within arm's reach of me at all times.
That was going to be my guess.
Yeah.
I was going to let you, do is speak your truths or whatever.
Right.
But if you were to say, "Hey, David, guess what? My special sauce is going to be," I'd say lots and lots of guns.
Yes, several.
Um, and then you would retort back with, "Is that a fat joke? How gauche?" Uh,
Damn, that's actually better than what we came up with. We should have done no, but yeah, I mean, not to sound like the resident hillbilly gun nut because I don't think I am, but I
no.
mean, look, if shit were to go wild with the zombies showing up, I would be all right for a short time, and then I would get in my truck and leave, and just hope for the best at that point. Here for a good time, not a long time, right?
100%.
Yeah. We ain't building no shelters because we ain't sheltering. All right, that's my point.
Yeah, we ain't sheltering, we wilding.
Yes, right.
Um,
Better to burn out than fade away, baby.
exactly. Yes. No, I like I like uh, a lot of the getting on the road and just seeing where life takes you kind of aspect. Not really
Right,
setting up shop one place too long. I mean, you see in movies and shows how they do their fair bit of walking and then they kind of set up shop at one place until the zombies come and invade that place and then they have to move and rinse and repeat. So I kind of get that might be a thing that happens, but you could avoid all that if you just try and find a decent car and trick that bitch out with you know one of those cow splitters
yeah.
on the front of it.
I would basically just tell all the zombies to fuck around and find out. Is that's basically what I would do. But to kind of somewhat pivot back into movies, like I think there have been some good ideas in the movies of what to do. Like just like thinking about it from like a logical standpoint. Like I think the idea of I believe this is in the remake of Dawn of the Dead where they're like, let's go to this island. That seems like a good idea. It doesn't work out for them so much in the movie, but you think about it and you're like, no, I mean, that makes sense. You're surrounded by water, as long as there are no zombies on the island, conceivably that's a place you could defend,
Right.
because I don't think zombies can swim. They can barely, they just amble around like drunks. So I'm pretty sure that swimming is not in the cards for them.
Right. Yeah. Um, no, well, yeah, we're definitely gonna get into the movie stuff here in just a bit. Yeah, I feel like if I saw something like this coming, like a zombie apocalypse, I would say fuck my Honda and go grab a just a very big vehicle, because it seems like that would be necessary if you plan on really getting anywhere. Really. because you're not going to run anyone over in a Civic.
Well, not to any degree of danger, at least.
Right, yeah. Um,
Honda Civic is basically like the Tyco pedal car for adults.
right, it is the definition of it gets you from point A to point B.
It's only like the only car that I can think of that's more boring than a Civic is a Toyota Camry.
Yeah, the
And you
Camry
can even get
and
a Camry with V6. So I mean, I don't know. It's tough.
right, like the Toyota Camry and the Honda Accord, in my mind, have always been like the older, more boring ass sibling of the Civic and the Corolla, respectively.
Yeah, at least the Civic you can get like the Type R or the SI. With the Camry,
Right,
you get the Dadmobile.
really is a dad mobile. It's like, you're getting into dad territory where you
You only
don't
wear white New Balances,
right.
jeans.
Yeah, you're not quite ready to make the jump into minivan lands,
Mhm.
or maybe your wife has the minivan and you get the boring dad car.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um
sad life. Let's take a moment to shed a tear for all of our
all of our
fallen.
fellow dads and
Yeah,
and moms,
yeah.
all of our fellow boring parents. Yes. May zombies come in and fuck things up and make things more interesting for you again.
I don't feel like that's something they would want to happen as parents, but I'm also not a parent, so I don't know.
Yeah, that I was being facetious. My damn dry sense of humor. Anyways, marching forward. Um, so guns for you then? You think you'd be a little bit more up close and personal, or do you think you'd practice and hone your sharpshooting skills so you can?
I mean, I would always say that you should have a plan B. So, I mean, at some point you're going to run out of ammunition or, you know, have to sleep and something could, make it through
Mhm.
or get close to you. So, I mean, yeah, definitely you've got to have a backup plan. I don't know off the top of my head what that might be because I feel like once they're that close, if I've got if I'm holding a rifle or a gun of some kind, then I'm probably pretty fucked.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess I could conceivably, depending on like if it was a rifle, I could turn it around and beat them with the butt end of it. You know,
Y- yeah, I watched the original um Night of the Living Dead last night, and
great movie.
actually back to back that and Dawn of the Dead. And I got a good glimpse of all kinds of ways that you could defend yourself against zombies once your ammo runs out, in all kinds of entertaining ways. So yeah, I'm just going to store all that information in the dark recesses of my mind and wait for it to come back up when and if the zombie apocalypse ever happens.
Just in case.
Right. Shauna, a good friend of ours and what, four-time guest of the podcast
Yes,
now.
basically a co-host at this point.
Right, just honorary co-host. She I talked this is actually a topic that she'd be very well suited for, because several times we've gotten together and she's talked about like, hey, have you ever thought about preparing for the zombie apocalypse? And like, I thought she was bringing it up as a joke, but like she legit has plans. Like she wanted to buy a big farmhouse, like on a giant piece of land, um with like her relatives, and just go live out in the middle of nowhere, or have it ready like as a second home, so that if it ever happens, then she has a place. And she it would have like the second story with I guess a terrace or whatever, where you can go out there and use it as a sharpshooting nest. She had this whole elaborate plan set out. So Shauna, if you're happening to listen to this episode, I'm sorry if I fucked up anything in the details of your plans.
She seems
uh,
like the type of person that would take it very seriously if you were not accurate to her plan.
she's like, fuck you, I'm not your friend anymore.
I like Shauna, but she seems like she would take that in some kind of personal way.
Nah. But yeah, she her plans were elaborate, and I was like, oh, okay, well, you're serious then. Okay, well, that's great. Maybe I should put some more thought into it. That was like my first thought. I was like, man, fuck, like maybe I'm not prepared.
What does
Uh,
she know that I don't?
right. Is there something going on here? Um, so yeah. Anything else we want to touch on with preparing for a possible apocalypse before we jump into the movie and TV fair?
No, I mean, I think that pretty well covers it. I think everybody knows that it's fun to talk about, but it's not going to happen, right? Like, let's focus on some real problems.
Right, exactly. So yeah, movies and TV. Should we get The Walking Dead out of the way so we can get
Yes,
into the
please.
actual
Let's
good
do
shit?
that.
Okay, so the first like season and a half were good. Everything else was bullshit. The end. No.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
did you watch any of The Walking Dead,
I
Ted?
watched the first season, and I watched the first season because I was such a big fan of the books.
Mhm,
I loved the comics um, for a time, and then they got kind of too much too. But
sure.
I was really into the comics for a time. I think they kind of hit right at a time where zombies weren't quite cool again. Um,
Right.
like 28 Days Later had come out, and everybody, or a lot of people, have been like, "This is a really good movie." And of course, like the Romero stuff was happening. I think Land of the Dead had either just come out or was just about to come out. Um, and so zombies weren't quite quote unquote back yet, but like there
Mhm.
was still a pretty dedicated following um, for that particular type of horror. And I was into it. I liked all the Romero films and some other stuff and the 20 and the 28 Days Later, and so I checked it out on recommendation. I was really into it. And I heard they were doing a show, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I don't. It's going to be on basic cable, so how far are they really going to go with it and this and that, and it was just not good. I don't know. Like I tried the first because the first season, what, like 6 or 8 episodes. Uh,
Yeah, it wasn't too long of a first season.
it was 6 or 8 episodes too long. I didn't think it was that good. I'm one of those people where it's like either do the books as a film or whatever, you know,
Mhm.
keep them true to form, or if you're gonna change them, like change them. And
Right.
I feel like I got bait and switched because the first couple of episodes, the first episode in particular, is very, 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 very comic accurate,
Yeah, that's what I heard.
and then it goes like, yeah, there's some books, I guess, sure, like, um,
Yeah.
and so I didn't like it for that reason, and then I also just like nobody in the show could fucking act. At least in that show, like there are people in it, there are actors that are or were a part of that show that like are talented, but I
Mhm.
feel like they were just told, nah, this isn't going to do anything. Just fuck it, phone it in, because I feel like nobody tried. And then I quit giving a shit pretty much after the end of the first season because I was like, wow, that was not good. Um, and I never expected it to become like the phenomenon that it has.
Yeah. That's very much how I felt about Fear the Walking Dead. Like I gave that show a solid, first season watch, and I was like, this is total garbage. Like I hate myself more than the show for like putting myself through this nonsense. Um but yeah, The Walking Dead, watched it I watched it for a while. And I didn't watch it as soon as it came on. Came on the air. I think someone told me about it after the first season or two, and eventually I was caught up to the point where I was watching new episodes as they aired. And I think I stopped watching the season after Negan was finally introduced. And I think at that point I was about to swear it off because I felt like it was just the same rinse and repeat BS like over and over again. And I was just like, this is the same old stuff over and over. I'm done with it. But everyone was like, no, like Negan's coming. Like all signs are pointing to Negan coming. So like you need to watch it. And so I was like, fine, I'll hang on. And they introduced him, and spoiler alert for those of you that haven't watched The Walking Dead, he fucking kills two of the main characters like right off the bat. No pun intended, because it
Yeah.
was with the bat. And you know, I say this a lot. I said it earlier in this episode. Like, I have a pretty strong stomach when it comes to like gore and whatnot, but like, you know, at the end of that season, when you know he's introduced and he comes out of like the camper, and it's shown that he bashes the brains in of one of, you know, the main characters, but you don't know who, until the opening of the next season. You find out that it's the redhead dude. I forget what his name is, with the goatee or whatever. And then he turns around and kills Glenn. And like, I felt fucking ill. Like, I was sick to my stomach because I don't know, like, it was just so gross. And I'm not talking about just visually. Like, I mean, the visuals were, I don't know, kind of incredible, but like, it just felt gross. Like they had to really drive the point home that Negan was like a force to be reckoned with, but they
Yeah,
were
it was
trying too
gratuitous.
hard. Yeah. Yeah, gratuitous is definitely a good word. And so after, like, I just slowly lost interest after that. And that season after, yeah, I don't think I ever watched again. And then come to find out that like Negan is like part of the gang now. I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? Like, he
Hey, hey, so
literally
remember where I killed two of your homies in a really terrible fashion? That's my bad. I was high. Is what happened there. So I would like to formally apologize.
right, like I had peyote stuck in my bandana, and I was just taking whiffs of that shit, like, just on the side. You know, like, whoa, let's get this done. Um, but yeah, I don't know. The Walking Dead, it's
The thing.
whatever. It's a thing. I get why people like it. It's like I said, I held on for a little bit, but I you would have to pay me to watch the rest of it. I
Yeah.
really have no interest in watching the the end of it. And I couldn't even tell you if they still have new episodes out.
Gotta hope not. Um, in terms of movies, of course, there's the Romero films. You know, those are really the
Yeah, let's talk about the good ones.
yeah, those are really the like the really well known ones. Of course, Night of the Living Dead, the first one,
Hmm. Which is
classic.
available on YouTube.
Yeah, I you told me this. I didn't know that was part of the public domain.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you can watch that on YouTube like guilt free.
Yeah, and Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
The that is the official or well, official sequel, unofficial sequel. I don't know,
Yeah, I don't know that it's like
part of the
part 2
original canon.
necessarily, but as yeah, you know, it's definitely at least a spiritual sequel at the very least.
Yeah,
Um,
but it is available on YouTube as well, for free. So
right.
so you can watch that one as well.
Yeah, both of those are great and classics for a reason. Um, they both kind of operate on a level beyond just being a zombie movie. Like the first one has a lot of dealings with like race relations, and
Hmm.
Romero always said that was by accident. Like he didn't set out to make a movie like that. He just happened to cast is it Dwayne Chapman? I think is the
Right.
it's the lead actor. He just happened to be African American. You know, when he cast that actor, he just said he was the best actor available, so we wanted to put him in the lead. And you know, he wasn't intending to set out to make a movie that had a lot of commentary on racial tensions and racism, but it ended up
Sure.
being that way because the actor was African American.
Right.
Um, and then the second one, Dawn of the Dead, like it's definitely a critique on consumerism and consumer culture, which
For sure.
I don't know that it was an accident on the first one. Like, I don't want to assume intent. And for all I know, you know, Romero was just like, sure, let's run with this, you know. But,
Yeah.
you know, they're both great
Yeah.
films. A Day of the Dead is also good. I don't think it. A lot of people. That's a lot of people's favorite which I think it's good. Like I don't think any of the first three are bad movies necessarily, but I think in my personal opinion, it's the weakest of the three.
Hmm.
Um, but still good. And then he would go on to make several other several other of the Dead movies. Land of the Dead came out in '05 or so, and it's not very good, but it's a movie you can watch.
Hmm.
John Leguizamo's in it. I think he becomes
Right.
a zombie. Spoiler alert. But it's there, and of course, rest in peace, Romero. Like he's an icon for a reason. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Him and Tom Savini, he did the makeup and practical effects makeup and stuff like that for a lot of those movies. Um, I want to say the at least the Dawn of the Dead, right? That was kind of like his big one.
I believe so.
I mean, I was listening to that episode, the podcast, the history of horror uncut, which is a good one, by the way. If you're a fan of horror, you should definitely check that out because they get some pretty cool interviews with some high profile horror aficionados. But he was on there and he was talking about some of the work that he's done, and he's just a super interesting character. And it's like so full of like charisma and enthusiasm for his work. Like after all these years, like he's not like, oh, I'm like done with it. Like you hear it in his voice, like he's still, after all these years of working in the industry, has all this excitement for what he does. So it's
Yeah,
just really cool to hear him talk about that.
yeah. He's a really great follow on social media as well.
Oh yeah.
If you're into that.
Okay. That's cool. But yeah, you just spoke on Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, and I watched those two back to back last night for the first time. I had seen the remake of Dawn of the Dead, which came out in like 2004, 2005, but I had not yet seen the original. So yeah, that was an interesting couple of hours. The first one, the Night of the Living Dead, it I think I told you this last night. It felt a lot longer than like a 90-minute runtime.
It's a slow movie. It is.
Yeah.
Um,
But it is like it's great. Like I really enjoyed it, and it is bleak as fuck.
yeah, it is like it's very tough to pull off a movie that like doesn't have any light at the end of the tunnel. Um,
Right.
but I think he did with that one because I think it's a realistic ending to the movie that he made.
Yeah. Yeah, when I saw him saw all the I don't know what you want to call them, villagers or just townspeople coming to clear out the zombies, just walking around, and they come across that house that um what's his name is holed up in, and they're coming up to the house at like the same pace that he's like trying to come out, and I was like, oh no,
Yeah,
like
it's gonna end badly.
yeah, and I was like, oh Jesus, I was really hoping for um for a different ending, but with that ending, I was like, as sad and upsetting as it is, it, like you said, it makes sense, um, and it's a good ending, But if you haven't seen it, get ready to be sad, motherfucker.
Yeah,
And then Dawn of the Dead, which even though it was only 10 years later, was like a huge step up in terms of a, a lot of stuff, really.
yeah.
Like the acting performances, it was shot in color,
They got a
and
budget.
right. Like you said, the idea of shooting in a mall was pretty great. It kind of touches on consumerism and how I, like it actually had substance to it. Like you hear them, talking about how long they could actually live there. They kind of they decide to land the helicopter on the mall's roof, and they're like, we could actually, with the supplies we have here, we could actually, try and barricade. some walls and make sure that it's a safe place to stay, but we could actually stay here for a long period of time. And his, I don't think they were married, right? They were just boyfriend and girlfriend.
I don't know. It's
Uh,
been a long time since I've watched that movie.
yeah. But she was talking about how it could end up feeling more like a prison than an actual home. Um, and and so there was a lot of great conversation there between the four main characters that we had, that just talking about what like their little lives in that instance could potentially be like in the apocalypse, where they it seems like they have everything they need, but is it really living, and is it better to um take their chances on the outside and and try and actually make it, instead of like just being in this fucking mall and barricaded inside with not too many options. But um yeah, all in all, it was a solid flick. And um I don't know if I want to give too much away. The scene with the biker gang was fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like, I won't go too farther than that. If for those of you listening that haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, it's crazy. That's when it really, you know the proverbial turn it up to 11 and then rip the knob off kind of
Yeah.
thing.
It's 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 a great one. I don't know what else to say. I mean, like, it's a classic for a reason. Like I said.
Yeah. um you want to talk about some of the more contemporary um zombie flicks we got?
Yeah, definitely.
So we can talk about the goat, the greatest of all time, which is Shaun of the Dead.
That is a fact. We've talked
Yeah,
about it on the podcast before. That is legitimately one of my favorite, if not my favorite movies ever.
yeah, it's so damn good. And another kind of a commentary on consumerist culture. Uh, you know, he, but like a very funny take, obviously, because he spends like almost the entire uh first day of the movie like unaware that the apocalypse is a thing and is happening, because he's so used to like just wandering through life as a
An automaton, more or less.
right, yeah, just
Yeah.
someone who just going through the motions and whatnot. So but it's got a lot of heart to it. It's not just comedic fare. Like there's actual poignant moments where um you know there's some emotions. So yeah, it's a good one. And like the Batman soundtrack line like gets me fucking every time.
The throwing the records is one of my favorite scenes where he's just like, Sade. Oh no, that's Liz's. Well, she did dump you. Just fucking kills me. Where he's just like, that's a perfect justification to throw a fucking record of hers at a zombie. It's just there's so the I just like it. I'll take over this episode and we'll just make the whole thing about Shaun of the Dead. But I legitimately love that movie and I laugh almost to the point where it hurts every time I watch it, and I've seen it literally 100 times.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, so Edgar Wright is the director, and he's done some great movies, and of course they pretty much all star Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. But I think Shaun of the Dead is my favorite of of his films, and just a great zombie movie in general.
Yeah,
Um,
it's good because it doesn't like the zombies aren't the joke, right? Like they're in on some of the jokes, but it's not making fun of zombies or horror, and that's why I think it's so successful in that it has a true. You can tell those guys love those type of movies.
right. Yeah. Now that you mention that, like I don't think I ever really took the time to analyze it like that. Like it's not like the zombies are besides the point, but it also feels like they're not necessarily the main focus, despite it being a zombie movie. Like it's about, you know, Simon Pegg's character trying to organize everything to get to the Winchester and have a pint and wait for this all to blow over. Um, everything that happens in between and after. Have you by chance seen Warm Bodies?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. It's also I don't think necessarily your kind of movie, really. It's I feel like it's the dude's equivalent of a Twilight movie, like, but about zombies. Um, it's more of a romance tale, I guess. Uh, that has zombies. It also has a great soundtrack too. But one of our longtime listeners and fans, Mackenzie, she actually posted on the Facebook group page when I asked for a favorite zombie movie. She mentioned Warm Bodies, and I was like, finally, some love for Warm Bodies. So yeah, I just had to throw that one in there, even though you don't really have anything to say about it, which is cool. Um, you let's dive back into the 28 days and weeks later movies and talk a little bit more about them. um do so would you technically consider them zombie flicks?
So like I personally don't consider them zombie movies in the traditional sense. Like I said, I really like 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later I did watch once. Um I think that it's possible to look at them, and I mean obviously you can look at them and say okay, they took inspiration from a lot of the classic zombie tropes, but I don't think that, like I said, I'm kind of a purist in that way where it's like it's all or nothing for me in that respect, where it's like they changed one thing, therefore they're not zombies. Just like, you know, if you take a movie and it's 4 parts Dracula, but he doesn't suck blood, like that's not a vampire, you know?
Sure.
So while I do really enjoy the first one, I don't personally consider it a zombie movie.
I mean, that makes sense. I don't know, I feel like I'd have to revisit them in order to make a better assessment, or a more recent assessment, because it has been quite a while since I've seen both of them. But yeah, I like I said, in the beginning of the podcast, and I'll say it again. Like I totally get the arguments that you have made and that others have made, that it's, from a purist standpoint, it's just difficult to justify it being them being zombie movies, with all things considered, from prior and especially classic zombie flicks.
I mean, we could sit here for the rest of time basically and talk about zombie stuff, but
Right.
I think we've probably talked at our listeners enough at this point. We're like an hour in, so
Right.
um, we'll go ahead and hit our normal segment that we end all shows with, or try to end all the shows with, and that is shit that doesn't suck, where we recommend things that we like, that we've partaken in recently, that we think you might be into, or some of you might be into as well. My show that doesn't suck this week is kind of topical. I watched this for the first time the other day. It had come very, very highly recommended from a lot of people. I finally got around to watching it, and it is called One Cut of the Dead. This movie came out a couple of years ago now, I think. It is a Japanese horror movie about zombies. Um,
Mm.
a brief synopsis: it's about a group of, a film troupe, so to speak, that is in an abandoned warehouse trying to film a zombie movie when a zombie outbreak happens for real. And they are kind of caught in the quick of it. And then, of course, the title "One Cut of the Dead" comes from the fact that it's a one cut movie. Um, and it seems like it's actually one solid cut rather than something like 1917, for example, where it's made to look that way, but there are definitely edits in it.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, you were telling me about that the other day, and I was like, "Oh, that sound fucking awesome."
Yeah,
So
it's available on Shutter for those of you that
okay.
are familiar with that. It's like $6 a month, and it's kind of like Netflix for horror and thrillers and stuff like that. I enjoy a lot, but
Yeah, Shutter. It's a great streaming service.
yeah,
For both, your casual horror viewer and your hardcore horror fan. So it's and a steal for the price point. So, but my shit that doesn't suck is just a random one-off documentary that I came across on, I believe it was Amazon Prime, called Lovecraft: Fear of the Unknown, and it was a little bit of a just a brief overview of H.P. Lovecraft and his life, and the a bit of a deep dive into some of the more well-known stuff that he has written, like Call of Cthulhu and his earlier works, which are escaping my mind at this point in time. But it was that one of my favorite things about it was getting all these like well-renowned um, horror like directors and actors and writers to come and talk about his work and like dissect it a little bit, because that there's a lot to be said about H.P. Lovecraft, both good and bad, but they really do a good job of putting it all in context for you so you can understand like it truly being a product of the time. So yeah, it's if you have Amazon Prime, it's available to stream for free. So yeah, I definitely suggest going to check that out. So, but yeah, that I believe that's going to do it for this episode and the fourth installment of Informal Paranormal, where we talked about zombies. Go subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Leave us a rating and review. If you haven't already, 5 stars or 1 stars, none of this middle of the road bullshit. And as always, be kind, stay geeky, and eat lots of cheesecake. Bye.
Peace.
All right. Whoop. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Hello, everyone.
Sorry, were we starting?
I got like 5 words in, and you're like, oh!
That was my turkey call.
It's pretty good, actually. Oh, shit. Okay.